Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of art. It's the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson, coming to you from the 40 West Arts District in Lakewood, Colorado. And joining me from his podcast studio in Rapid City, South Dakota, you know him as quite possibly the most interesting man in the world, my partner in art, Wes Brown.
Hey, Todd. Oh, my God. Here we go. I am so excited for today's guest. I'm just over the moon. Watched this documentary this weekend. I know you did too. Amazing. Mandatory watching for everybody. Everybody should see this documentary. It's fantastic, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not doing our regular shtick this week because we really want to get into our interview with our next guest. But I want to give a little context of kind of where we're at and why we wanted to talk with our guest this week. If you've been listening to us since we've been back from our hiatus, you have probably noticed that we've made political comments and been more politically outspoken than previous. When we decided to reboot, we were about 3.5 months into the Trump presidency, and both Wes and I were already horrified by what we saw transpiring. Wes said, I don't think we should shy away from commenting from what is going on, and I was in complete agreement with that. That said, this is an art podcast, and we would rather it just be business as usual and having lovely conversation with artists about art, but it's not. We're not afraid to literally address the elephant in the room, which brings us to our guest this week. A few months back, as I was thinking about the guests that we would like to have on the political climate of the United States currently, the Instagram algorithm god started feeding me posts from Pete Souza's Instagram. I was familiar with some of his iconic photographs, but I admittedly didn't know much about the man. And I thought, what better person to have on than someone that had a front row seat to the presidency, not just once, but twice, and talk about his work and what he experienced during that time. So this week, we are absolutely honored to bring you our interview with Pete Souza. Pete Souza is an American photojournalist that served as an official White House photographer for President Ronald Reagan from June 1983 until 1989. And was also the official photographer for Ronald Reagan's funeral services in 2004. He served as the chief official White House photographer and the director of the White House photo office for all 8 years of the Obama administration. He is the best-selling author of multiple books, including Obama, An Intimate Portrait, Shade, A Tale of Two Presidents, and The West Wing and Beyond, What I Saw Inside the Presidency. You can check out his work at PeteSouza.com, and you can follow him on Instagram at Pete Souza. Pete, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate your willingness to talk with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, I want to start this off like we do a lot of times with our particular podcasts and kind of give some people some background of who you are as a person, where you grew up, what kind of family life you had, and what it was like for you in your early years.
I grew up in Massachusetts. My dad was a boat mechanic. My mom was a nurse. I aspired to become second baseman for the Boston Red Sox. But, as much as I loved sports, I wasn't really that talented. And eventually, when I went to college in my junior year, I took a photography class. And I can still remember the feeling I had when I made my first print. This is back in the analog days of black and white, where you're developing the film yourself, and then you go into the dark room under those safe lights, red safe lights, and you make a print, expose it on a piece of paper. And I remember that first print when it came up in the Dectal developer, that I was hooked, that I was like, somehow I kind of knew that photography was it for me. Now, it took me, quite a while to get any good at it, but I think it was the magic of seeing that print come up that really carried me forth to this day.
I think for a lot of photographers, that moment, especially if we're of an age where we all shot film, and that magic moment of seeing that first print come up, there's nothing like it, right?
Right.
Yeah, and even today, even today, I mean, I do my own printing now on with an Epson printer, and even though I'm have the image on my screen, my computer screen, when it comes out of that printer, there's still a little bit, still a little bit of feeling that you see it on a piece of paper. Different, obviously, because you're not making the print and the chemicals and all that kind of stuff. But there's still something special about having one of my photographs on a piece of paper that you can display as opposed to just on a computer screen.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it, but yeah, in this day and age where most photographs are looked at on computer screens and phone screens and what have you, there is still some of that magic in there, that tactile experience of actually holding a print in your hands, right?
For me, for sure.
Yeah, and I think for so many people, we don't print prints like we used to. I mean, I've gone through all my grandmother's prints, and it's interesting to see the moments caught back in the 30s, and then everything lives on a screen, and it can just be gone, and we just kind of flood through them. But to actually print a print, hang it on the wall, or put it on your desk, that's a totally different feel for it. It gives it a little bit more meaning, I think.
Definitely. In some ways, it's more permanent.
Yeah.
I've got a few photographs hanging here in my office, and, they're not just on the screen for 5 or 10 seconds. They're there, forever, probably.
Right. So after you graduated from college, did you go right to Kansas to start working as a photojournalist, or what was your transition from college to Hutchinson, Kansas?
My transition from college was that I couldn't find a job. I mean, quite frankly, my photographic portfolio, after only doing photography for a couple of years, was not that good, and I was still trying to figure out what kind of photographer I wanted to be, but I couldn't get a job. I applied, at a couple of newspapers. I couldn't get a job. And I worked for my uncle's business, which had nothing to do with photography, for a year, and then was sort of itching that I needed to do something to figure out how to move myself forward with this photography thing, and decided that, I'd go to graduate school, and Kansas State University offered me a teaching assistantship where I would, as a GTA graduate teaching assistant, teach the basic photography class with an agricultural journalism professor. While I was there, they also had a good college newspaper, which I joined the staff of. And that's really where things started to come together, I think, for me. We had a staff of, 7 or 8 other photographers. So there was a lot of competition to try to get the page one photograph. I was covering Big 8 sports. I kind of talked my way into stringing for the Associated Press at the same time. And, so that's when things really kind of came together for me. And it was after that 2 years at Kansas State in their graduate program that I then went to work for a couple small newspapers in Kansas.
We have a connection. My family lives in the Hutchinson, Kansas area, my dad's family. So,
well, that was that was my first job at the Hutch News. I was there for almost 2 years, I guess.
Yeah. So it was kind of cool when I was watching your documentary that came up. I'm like, oh my God, that's so neat. So having that personal connection, how was that experience being a photojournalist, going from that to being a photojournalist? Did it take you a little while to kind of get your feet under you, or did you ever feel like you had your feet under you?
Well, I think we considered ourselves at the Kansas State Collegian, which was a 5-day-a-week newspaper. We considered ourselves a real newspaper. No, we were not just covering campus news, but also, news in Kansas. I will say that we were the only newspaper in Kansas that, when Pope John Paul, I think it was John Paul, passed away, We were the only morning newspaper in Kansas that had it in the paper the next morning because I was then the photo editor at the Collegian, and I got into a vehement argument with the editor about what should be the page one photo, and we blew past our deadline. It was like midnight, I think, before we finally came to an agreement on what the front page photo was going to be. And like everything was closed down. We had shut off the AP wire machine. There was like hardly anybody there. And Ray, the janitor, walks in because he's usually scrubbing the floors after we, leave the newspaper at night. And he looks that up at us and he says, "Oh, did you hear the Pope died?" And we're like, "What?" We didn't know. So we fired back up the AP wire machine. I actually stole the photo from some magazine of the Pope, which, is probably a copyright violation. Although it was before 1978, so maybe not. I don't know. So, we were the only newspaper in the state to have that news the next morning.
Wow.
Because, we had blown past our deadline. Anyway.
Yeah, you had inside information from
the
Ray.
Janitor. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think he had been listening to the radio or something, and
yeah, probably biding his time as he's working, right? And
Yeah.
heard it.
Yeah.
That's great.
What a great story. What did those early years working for, small newspapers teach you that maybe you didn't get? Because it sounded like it was pretty competitive at the university. Was it still competitive at the small town papers that you were working
Yeah,
at?
I mean, I had there were two other photographers on staff, so small staff. I think more than anything, both in Hutch and then later at the Chanute Tribune, it was the variety of assignments that you got. You might be doing 2, 3, 4, 5 assignments a day, and in each case, you needed to get a good enough photograph to be published, and your name was going to be under it. So that puts a lot of pressure on you to try to make something out of nothing on every assignment. I was also trying to do projects here and there on my own time, where I'd get to spend more time with subjects to try to put together what we call the photo page, 3 or 4 photos along with a story. But I think more than anything, it was just trying to make something out of maybe not much, an interesting photograph out of what maybe on the face of it would be kind of a boring assignment. Especially true when I was at the Chanute Tribune, where I was a one-man staff, and we did not have a wire photo machine, meaning we couldn't use AP photos or Getty, there wasn't even Getty images then. So every picture in the paper was taken by me. I think I had like a young high school kid that would help me out from time to time. But, every day I had to have a front page photo, a sports front photo, and, a business page photo every single day, so that was a real challenge in itself. And I think that was just such a useful experience. And there's not that many staff photography jobs anymore at newspapers, but for photojournalists wanting to get started, if you can land a job like that, that's a great training ground, I think.
Yeah.
It's invaluable experience. Speaking personally, like you said, you're always on the hunt for something, a lot of the assignments aren't interesting per se, but you're like, you need to come back with some art that is interesting and compelling. And if you're working with a team like you had, you want to get the front page, right? Like you want to have you want to have that big photograph that runs on the front.
My predecessor at the Chanute Tribune was a guy named Dave LaBelle, and the Tribune was a afternoon paper, meaning it would be delivered around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So our deadline, I believe, was like around 11 or 12, noon. And my Dave LaBelle used to say, yeah, if a dog crosses the street between 9 and noon, it might end up on the front page, which is being a little facetious, but that's kind of the way it was when you're working at a daily paper like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's not far off the mark because there's days when if it's a slow news day locally, you they send you out and you have to find a photograph that, it could be the dog crossing the street, right?
Yeah.
So how do you pivot from working at small papers? How did you transition from being a photojournalist to actually working in an official capacity as a White House photographer? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody, they go look back at their life and they see the opportunities of luck that came their way, and that certainly happened to me. When I was working for these small newspapers in Kansas, I had always aspired to work for the Kansas City Star, which was kind of like the largest metro paper in the Kansas, Missouri, area. And I had interviewed with this woman, Carol Greenewalt, who is the director of photography at the Kansas City Star. And much to my dismay, she did not hire me. She didn't think I had enough experience, and she hired somebody else with more experience than me. So, not happy about that. What I did know is that she continued to follow my career and later became the White House photo editor. So when they had an opening in the middle of Reagan's first term, she called me up. I was then working at the Chicago Sun-Times, doing really well. It was just totally unexpected. I wasn't really a fan of Reagan's. I didn't think I was going to. I kind of blew her off at first. She called me. I was like, I don't think this is for me. And I think that I went home that night and had a conversation with myself, I guess, because I was living alone. And I thought to myself, well, one of the things I always thought about is, that my photographs could become a part of history. And what better way to do that than to photograph a president from the inside? So I called her back, said that I wanted an interview for the job, and and was chosen. So that's how that came about.
That's crazy.
So there must have been something though, even though she didn't hire you, she must have saw something in your photography that made her want to kind of keep tabs on you and see where you were going.
Well, I guess, I mean, I had done really well in Illinois, and I think I had gotten a little bit of attention, in the photojournalism circles, which is pretty small, really. At least it was back then, through NPPA and things like that. So, I think that it was probably not that difficult to keep tabs on me or keep tabs on anyone that, was doing well in this, in this photojournalism community. I mean, I actually have never really had a conversation with Carol about that specifically, but yeah, I mean, I don't know much more than that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, you made an impression, and then she must have seen your name or something and saw, wow, this kid's going somewhere. He's doing good work. Were you extroverted or introverted growing up?
Yeah, no, I was definitely not an extrovert. I'm not. I mean, I've become, fairly comfortable speaking before crowds and things like that, but I'm still not an extrovert.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of photographers. I think they tend to be introverts. They like being behind the camera, but you learn real quick, especially like working as a photojournalist, you kind of have to put your happy face on and put yourself out there a little bit to, to move a picture along or to get that picture, because sometimes, you have to not only direct people, but also be personable so they feel comfortable with you so that they can give you that photograph that you're hoping to make, right?
I mean, I think it's different for every person. I mean, I am who I am. I can't change who I am. I disagree with you a little bit because I think I know a lot of photographers who are definitely extroverts. Um, and, and they've done really well. They're just, different people than me. And I'm sure well, I know they approach subjects a lot differently than the way I do. I mean, you can't really fake who you are. I am who I am. And, somehow I've developed a knack for being able to, I don't know what it is. I'm able to, I've come up with this term, I call it being invisibly present, where, clearly I'm there because I can't take any pictures if you're not actually there. But being able to navigate in such a way that, people almost forget about the fact that you're even there. I mean, President Obama, I mean, he even wrote about this in his memoir about me. I forget exactly what he said, but it was sort of, that I was just a constant presence, and I became part of the presidency. I mean, and it's not like I was a fly on the wall, because I wasn't on the wall and I'm not a fly, but I just have a knack of being able to, hang out, I guess, and shadow somebody, and they feel entirely comfortable with my presence.
Yeah, and that's what allows you to get these really intimate portraits that you've had with the Obama, the family, and also with the Reagans. I mean, there's some really great photos of, President Reagan and his wife, Nancy. So, and it's because they're comfortable with you and you're able to kind of just like blend in, and you're always there, and they just kind of forget, not forget you're there, but, you're just part of it. So
I think also being put in like situations that you're not comfortable with, you learn how to adapt to that, right?
Yeah, and I think I was better at it the second go around at the White House than the first go around. I mean, look, I went into the Reagan White House with only less than 4 or 5 years experience.
Wow.
As a photojournalist. When I went to work for President Obama for that White House, I had had a lifetime of experiences. So was much more of a seasoned guy. My knees didn't work as well and might have been a little slower. But I think I was smarter, and I had a better eye photographically, and just having, all the experiences that I had, I was, certainly a more confident photographer to document his presidency.
yeah, and you said in the documentary, you said you had to be ready for the fleeting moments, both big and small. Is part of that just intuition that you gain from all this experience? Or is there something that's kind of innate in you as a person, you think, that allows you to catch these moments, big and small?
I think it's a little of both, in some ways. I will say that, like right now, okay, now I'm not photographing every day. And it was my granddaughter's third birthday yesterday. So of course I'm the, documentarian of that party. And, I'm a little rusty. I mean, in terms of making moments, I don't know that I completely missed anything last night, but my framing was not perfect, and because I'm not doing it every day. When I was especially at the Obama White House, I was literally doing this every day, and you get into a certain rhythm of, framing, clicking the shutter at the precise moment. And, I felt that I was really on my game because I was just, I was doing it every single day. Photography, at least for me, and the kind of photography that I do, it's not like riding a bike. I mean, I haven't ridden my bike in a couple of weeks. I could jump on my bike today and, I'd ride perfectly, right? It ain't that way for me with photography. I mean, for me to be at the very top of my game, I need to be doing it every day. And I certainly was doing that, during the Obama administration, and, also when I worked at newspapers.
Yeah. I mean, the diversity of the things that you have to cover day in, day out. And I read somewhere that there was weeks that you produced upwards of 20,000 photographs, something like that. I read
Yeah, I
that
don't know.
somewhere.
That did get written somewhere, but it's not true.
No, okay. I mean, that's a
Um,
lot of photographs. Would that be maybe the whole team working?
I don't even know where that, I mean, I know where that was published and I don't know where that number came from, but I will say that, I shot 1.9 million photos in 8 years. And if you divide that by 8 years, given subtracting maybe, a few Sundays where I didn't have to come in, we're talking less than 1,000 pictures a day. It's somewhere between like 500 and 1,000, which is a hell of a lot different than 20,000 a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my guess is on average, I probably shot, I want to say maybe like 4 to 5,000 a week. I mean, maybe there'd be some weeks where it'd be a little more,
Sure.
especially on foreign trips, when we're doing, we might be doing 15 to 18-hour days every day, for 6 days or something like that. But I think the 20,000 is a misnomer.
Sure.
Okay.
So
Still,
like
that's a lot of
that,
photographs,
that's
though.
yeah.
But if you then, like, I probably averaged 10 hours a day. There's some 15 hours a day, some maybe 9 hours a day, but I don't know, probably I was at the minimum, I was photographing 10 hours a day or 11 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of photos, really, when you think about it.
Right.
If I shot 600 photos in a day, divide that by 11 hours, there's 60 minutes an hour. It's not a lot of photos, really.
Right. Yeah.
When you're doing this work, though, I mean, are you the only photographer? You have a team that works with you. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, I have a team that works with me. I mean, I did all the behind the scenes stuff. And then my team, if the president had an event, a public event, then we would have, multiple vantage points to photograph from. Oftentimes at those public events where the press photographers, the news photographers are set up, that's the best angle. Well, I'm behind the scenes, so I can't get to the best angle. So I would have somebody pre-position and then maybe at another angle. And then Chuck Kennedy on my staff would often set up remote cameras at these big events. So we'd have, cameras in multiple locations. And then we also had to cover, Mrs. Obama would always have a photographer with her on her solo events or her solo travel. She did a fair amount of travel herself. I stayed with the president, so somebody would always document her solo events. She's got a book out that just came out called The Look, and there's a ton of it's a coffee table book. There's a ton of photographs in there, and I have a few photographs, but all of my photographs in that book are the ones with the president, with her and the president. And so my staff has most of the pictures in the book because they're the ones that, traveled with her or did her solo events. And then we also had somebody who covered the vice president's solo events. He did a ton of travel, and I never did any of those trips. I would see the vice president when he was in the Oval Office, if he wasn't traveling, but in terms of when he would then go off to do his own events, somebody else on my staff would cover that.
And it sounds, and it is very glamorous to be the official White House photographer, but what people don't think about is all the long days and pretty much, I imagine you're on call 24/7. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you get days off at all? Or, I mean, you did say that there'd be Sundays sometimes where you didn't
Yeah.
have to necessarily be there, but it sounded like you were pretty much there pretty much every day of the 8 years that he was in office.
Yeah. I took one sick day in 8 years, despite having had, despite I had pneumonia twice, walking pneumonia twice, but I just kind of powered through it. And I saw him power through, being sick. So I sort of took my cues from him. I'm thinking like, okay, he's got a terrible sinus infection and he's still at work, then I can do the same. That's sort of the way I thought about it. I think towards the last, well, probably all of the second term, if he were going to play golf on Sunday, I would pass. That would be I was like, okay, I'm taking this day off. People should know to not feel sorry for me because, as we've just discussed, I did have a staff. So I could have easily taken days off. But, my thought process was, you never know when history is going to take place.
Right.
Like, you can't always get advance notice. Hey, next Tuesday, there's going to be history made. Or next, Sunday night, there's going to be history made. So my attitude was, I didn't think I would do all 8 years. I thought I would do 4 and then, bow out. But, my attitude was I'm going to be there every day, because you just never know when something might happen. And so that's why I did what I did, which was not take days off.
That's amazing work ethic and dedication. So, hats off to you because that's amazing.
I mean, you have to show up, right?
Well, and I think of all the times that, I'll take one thing back the last 3 years. My wife said to me, you need to take 1 week off each of the last 3 years. And so what I did is when President Obama went on vacation to Martha's Vineyard, I kind of knew what he did. If I'm going to do it, that would be the time that I would take a week off. So that's what I did. Those were the most 3 miserable weeks of my 8 years. Because I was just like nervous as hell that something was going to happen historically and I wouldn't be there. It was like the worst 3 weeks of his administration for me.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah.
So even though your wife convinces you to take a week off, you can't even enjoy it because
I couldn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Oh man. Enjoy it.
There was another thing that you said in the documentary that I had to watch it twice. I watched the whole documentary. I came back to watch that scene again. And it was during the scene where the Obamas are outside. And you're saying, my thought process is mood, emotion, and context. That's what I have to do. Can you kind of address that? It kind of blew me away because I don't think that way in a sense, like I'm going to go get the shot, but I'm not thinking like, this is what I have to do, these 3 things, and maybe there's more, but those 3 things just stuck out to me. Can you describe that a little bit?
I'm not sure that I guess that was a goal, and I don't think that necessarily applied to every photograph. I don't know, maybe it did. But I guess for instance, and I've only watched the film once because it's like impossible to watch yourself on a film. So I can't even remember the what I was exactly referring to. I said that after the fact, after the 8 years. So I must have had something in my head when I was saying that. I'll give you a for instance. I photographed every head of state phone call he ever made. Well, think of a picture of a guy on a phone. Pretty boring shit, right? It could be. But I took those really seriously because I'm thinking like, okay, how he relates to other world leaders, even if it's not in person, even if it's on a phone call, is important historically. And I always took those situations seriously enough that I was looking for context, mood, and emotion, because you can, in a still photograph with a guy on a phone, you can show all 3 of those things. And oftentimes it was, who else is in the room? Where's the phone call taking place? Is he seated or standing? Does he have his feet on the desk or is he not that relaxed? So all those things are going through my head as I'm photographing. And I remember the first time, like one of those phone calls was with Raul Castro, where they had come to an agreement on opening diplomatic relations with Cuba. And this would be the first time that a president of the United States had spoken to the leader of Cuba in I don't know how many years. So, important phone call historically. And one of the pictures I got, because I was thinking about this, like there were these two guys that for a year had been doing these secret negotiations with the Cubans. And they were in the room, seated on the sofas, listening to, him on the phone. And then there was a speakerphone so they could hear what Castro was saying. And I'm thinking these guys are an important part of this phone call, right? But the way they were seated, it just didn't work compositionally. And I was like, okay, maybe if I go right behind Obama, like literally 2 feet behind him, show him from behind, and then have these two guys in the background. So that was just something I was like thinking about in terms of context, and then the mood and emotion took place when they heard Castro say something on the speakerphone, and they both looked at Obama and put their thumbs up in the air, which, I didn't know that was going to happen.
Right.
But fortunately, I was standing right behind President Obama, and I've got this phone call of the two key guys that made this happen. So things like that, just trying to think context, mood, emotion.
That's awesome. I love that. And it makes me think differently about like maybe shots so this will stick with me anyway. So
right. And now what's going to happen is you're going to ask me to give you that photo, and it's going to turn out that the photo is not from behind, but from behind the two guys.
Right.
So
who knows? Right.
So my memory could be, completely opposite there, but that's sort of the way I was thinking about it.
No, that's no, we're not going to hold you accountable for anything. So thank you. I mean, the story is amazing. I mean, like a gazillion stories over 8 years is amazing. So thanks for sharing that. That's cool. That's a great example of that.
You had pretty much full access when you were working for the Obama administration. How did that differ from when you were White House photographer for the Reagan administration?
Well, for Reagan, he had a chief photographer during his first term, Michael Evans. I came in the middle of his first term. So I was sort of like the new guy, had never met Reagan. Protocols had already been established. And I just kind of played the part. Michael left after the first term, but myself and a couple of colleagues would kind of rotate the behind the scenes coverage. So it was hard to get into a rhythm where, you had the same, you had like total access. I mean, I think I had good access, but it wasn't like I was the guy. Like I wasn't, it was a rotation basis, which is not ideal when you're trying to get that, level of intimacy and access. With President Obama, I mean, part of it was like I had known him for 4 years before he was elected president. I mean, had been working for the Chicago Tribune. We were doing a big project on him. I got access to him for the Tribune that others, no one else got because we were the local paper, quite frankly. I traveled with him to, I think it was 6 countries, again, for the Tribune. I mean, I went to Africa with him, went to Russia and Ukraine, and I can't even remember every place I went. So I was in his private space a lot. So, we had a professional relationship. It wasn't a personal relationship, it was a professional relationship. But, he got to see how I worked and, he got to know me a little bit. And I had mentioned that I felt I had been a seasoned photographer, photojournalist coming into that job with President Obama. So when, he asked me to do the job, I said, the only way I'm doing this is if I have total access. Like, and he got it. I mean, he understood where I was coming from, that I wanted to, truly document his presidency for history. He understood the power of still photographs. And so once I got that okay from him, it's like, what's anybody on the staff going to say?
Right.
Like if anybody tried to kick me out, I go, well, go talk to that guy behind the desk, it's because of his trust in me that I was able to make the pictures that I did.
And he understood the importance of it, of documenting his time as the president. Like not everybody has that. I don't think that this current president, President Trump, necessarily understands that outside of, a PR shot or what have you. But as far as like historical photographs, I don't know. I don't see the intimacy of the photos that you made with President Obama. You really captured, I really feel like the essence of who he is as a person, as a father, as a husband, his interaction with people of all walks of life, right?
So, so much to say. I mean, my take on the current occupant of the Oval Office, as I like to call him, is that his presidency is, for the most part, a reality show. And I do believe that the official White House photographer, plural, I guess, do have access to the reality show. I mean, they post thousands of photographs, but there's no intimacy within him. Like he doesn't relate to people in an intimate way. It's everything to him is transactional.
Yep.
It's a transactional reality show. I mean, I kind of wrote about this for Vanity Fair a while back. And then it's not a slam on the official White House photographers, because seemingly they photograph everything that he does, but so like a cabinet meeting is not really a policy discussion where the press comes in for 30 seconds, makes a few pictures, and then they're asked to leave. And then he has the cabinet meeting. No, the press is there for the whole hour and a half or 2 hours. And each cabinet secretary goes on around the room and basically, tells the current occupant what a great job he's doing. And it's all captured on TV cameras. But that's kind of like, that's what his presidency is,
Yeah.
to me.
Last week, there was a photograph made by Andrew Harnick that you probably saw, that during his press conference, one of the people that were there had a medical emergency. And I thought it was very telling, that photograph of Trump standing, kind of looking with a blank stare and, not showing any kind of empathy or care to what was going on behind him. And you got to see, at least with the television footage, everybody being ushered out of the room. There's probably multiple photographers, and I saw them clicking away. But Andrew Harnick's photograph really kind of summed it up for me. This person that has no clue, no empathy. And I was, after, spending time looking at your photographs of President Obama and watching the documentary, the way I see it, I can't imagine President Obama just standing there not doing anything. He would have been one of the first people to rush over, I imagine, to make sure that that person was all right. In my
Yeah,
mind.
matter of fact, somebody, I saw that photograph when it was first, I saw it online somewhere, probably not that long after it was on the Getty Images website. And I was like, okay, this is an unbelievable photograph, because to me, it shows exactly who he is. And it was interesting to watch the video of that too, because as soon as the guy, started to pass out, they're trying to kick the photographers out of the room. and Andy Hornig had the presence of mind to make that one picture just as he was literally being ushered out of the room. Just incredible photo, a little back focus, but that's okay. I don't think it loses its power at all.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I was going to say is that is not long after that photograph appeared, somebody found a video of President Obama at an event in the it was an ACA event, Affordable Care Act event. I forget the exact circumstance of why they were having them. I think it was people that had gotten subsidies, or I can't even remember exactly what it was. But like that incident in the or event in the Oval Office, this was in the Rose Garden, and there were people standing behind him that kind of he was referring to. One was a pregnant woman who started to faint, and she was standing right behind President Obama. And I don't know how he even knew this, that she was about to faint, but there's video of him turning around and grabbing her before she actually faints.
Wow.
And then when I saw that video, I kind of vaguely remembered that. And I went back to my photos, and I don't have copies of every photo. All my photos are at the National Archives. And I didn't have a photo of that. I'm sure either myself or somebody from my staff definitely had the still photograph of him helping that woman. But I did find is right after the event, he went to find that woman, and she was inside the White House being taken care of. And so there's the photograph that I posted right outside the Oval Office, which I thought, okay, this would be a good counter to what the current occupant did with that guy passing out in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
I will point out too that I posted this the same day, and I didn't even say why I was posting it, but obviously people that follow me keep abreast of the news, and everybody knew exactly why I posted this photograph on this particular day,
Yeah.
which I find kind of amusing.
Yeah. No, that's amazing.
They caught on real quick. Talk about your use of Instagram and how you've been able to compare and contrast these different presidencies.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of did it more in 2017, what the last go around. And, I have been what's the word? Not forced, but I feel it's my imperative, I guess, to continue to do so today. Not every day, but more and more, I feel that I can contrast as I did with that photograph that you just popped up on the screen.
Did you get a little bit fatigued of doing it all the time? Is that why you kind of slowed down with it, or?
No, he wasn't president for 4 years, so I didn't have to do it for 4 years.
Well, true, but you kind of alluded that you haven't been quite as active with doing this time around, or have you?
No, I mean, I think I have to a certain extent. I mean, I think that there's so much coming at us that I tend to really do it when something he does really pisses me off. And it may not be the biggest news item of the day. Like I can't really respond to what's happening in Chicago, for instance, with ICE. And I mean, there's nothing that I can do to respond. I mean, I'm not going to go put myself in those situations to photograph because, I am not, I don't work for a newspaper or magazine. I can't just do that on my own. I just don't feel like I'm up for it physically. Yeah. And so those things really bother me, but I don't really respond to things like that. But stuff like blowing up the East Wing, just demolishing it, for a week, I think, or more, I was posting photos and commentary on that because that really pissed me off. how dare he, first lie to us saying the East Wing's not going to be touched, and then to just secretly do it
Mm.
with no real permission other than I want to do it, so I'm going to do it, and knocks down a whole building of the White House. That really pissed me off. So I did several posts about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, I also did several. I mean, I hardly ever do TV interviews. I probably haven't done any for a couple, 2 or 3 years, but I did I think, what did I do? Four interviews about the East Wing because I was so upset and everybody was calling me because they knew. The one great thing is I have photographs that I can show of what a historic building looked like and what happened inside that building on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a shame. It's the people's house, I mean, and Andrew
It's not
Jackson's,
his house. It ain't his house. I
Yeah,
mean, he like every president has temporary custody, and I think every president makes some renovations, but there's a process to go through to
Right.
make those renovations.
right.
Just knock down a building, basically a whole wing of the White House without going through a process of,
Right.
Is this necessary? Can we, if the East Wing needs renovating, can we renovate it instead? But just to knock it down
Yeah.
for no reason, I mean, anyway.
It's nefarious. This guy is nefarious. And I'm not a fan. I know Wes isn't a fan. And what he did to the Rose Garden. And you actually got married. You and your wife got married there at the Rose Garden. Like the 18th couple that had ever been married at the White House.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, nobody's heels got stuck in the Rose Garden. It's like one of the things that he was like,
that he was complaining about, right?
Yeah,
Or
it's
reason that it
come on.
needed to be done.
Yeah. I mean, I photographed for both Reagan and Obama state dinners in the Rose Garden where they, there's a way to put a temporary floor down if you're going to set up, a bunch of tables. And, there's been, as I say, state dinner. I'm sure there were other administrations, state dinners took place in the Rose Garden. So, I mean, nobody wants the Rose Garden to look like, a club in Florida, or what did some people call it? The outdoor patio at the Olive Garden or something like that.
Oh, good Lord. Hey, we're going to wrap this up because we want to be cognizant of your time, and you've been very gracious by allowing us to talk with you. I want you to talk a little bit about each of the books that you've published and what each one is about so that people can go, if they're not familiar with them, go check them out.
Yeah, so Obama: An Intimate Portrait is a coffee table book of President Obama's 8 years in office from my point of view. The photographs include historic photographs, but also personal photographs. It's presented chronologically, so it gives you, I think, a really good sweep of his presidency from day one until his last day. It's funny, when I was putting that book together, President Obama found out that I was doing this book, and and his advice to me was like, just choose the aesthetically beautiful pictures. And I was like, yeah, okay. But there are some, I tried to include some beautiful images in addition to, the historic ones, all pretty much behind the scenes, and to give people a view of what I thought his presidency was. And I wrote quite a bit of text as well for that one. Second book I did was called Shade, and it was taken directly from my Instagram and the post that I made throwing shade at the 45th president. So it'd be it'd be something he would tweet, the 45th president would tweet, or a news story about him on one side of the page, and on the other side of the page it would be a throwback photograph from the 44th president and my snarky caption, basically. And then the third book I did was called The West Wing and Beyond, because we had so many different titles. Like I wanted to call it Inside the Bubble, or Inside the Presidential Bubble. And my publisher thought nobody would know what that meant. Anyway, it's basically a book about the people and places that make the presidency work. It's not a book of pictures of President Obama. It's a picture book of all the other people and all the other places. So I dive into, certain people and certain places. I show people what the outer Oval Office is, what the cabinet room is, what takes place on the state floor. There's a section on, the South Lawn and the red room and the blue room, and just to give people a better sense of the functionality of the presidency, including, pictures of and on Air Force One, pictures of and on the helicopters, just kind of a behind the scenes view of the West Wing and beyond.
Wow. I think that's amazing. That's so cool. And for people that are listening, if you go to Pete's website, there's a tab that's entitled Books. You can go there and see the different titles. There's also links to where you can buy it. Obviously, you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all the big booksellers. But better yet, go to your local bookstore and request a copy. I'm sure they can get it in for you. And then how did the documentary really come about? Because I think it was definitely one of the best documentaries that I've seen in a long time. It was so well thought out and well done. How did that come about? How did you feel about it? I know you said that it was difficult for you to watch it more than once because it's just weird watching yourself.
Yeah. Well, I was contacted by one of the producers, Evan Hayes, and another producer, Jamie Lemons, who is a production partner with Laura Dern, the actress. They have a production company. So they jointly contacted me, and they had been painted. This is back in 2018, I guess. And they had been watching my throwing shade back then on Instagram. And then, when my book came out, and they contacted me about possibly doing documentary film. And I was like, okay, well, I'll talk to you about it. By the way, I'm going to be in LA. I'm doing a talk. You want to come to my talk? And so Evan and Jamie came to my talk. And then I remember they came backstage afterwards and they were like, we definitely want to do this documentary. And I was like a little nervous about it. I didn't know if I really wanted to put myself out there that way. I subsequently met with Laura Dern as well. And, I think so highly of her and her work, and knew enough about her that I was like, okay, if she's involved in this, I think I'm going to be on board. And then the three of them then recruited Don Porter, who had already done a couple of really noted documentary films, including one on Bobby Kennedy. And I finally, for good or bad, I agreed to let them do this documentary on me. And it was, I did not have any editorial say on the movie. Obviously, they filmed me, they interviewed me. I helped them with photographs in terms of, they would say, we're going to do we're going to do this section. And I would say, here's some photographs you should consider, but ultimately I didn't have any say on what kind of film they were making. And it was very hard to watch the film, to be honest with you. Yeah. Just because, it's a weird thing to see yourself on a big screen like that.
Well, I tell you, I watched it and I was on an emotional roller coaster. There was things I was just like so excited about. And to be completely honest, I voted for Obama, but it was a tough decision because I was a McCain man. But when you get done watching the movie, It changes how, for me, it changed how I felt about Obama. I mean, I grew to like him as a president. I didn't agree with everything he did, but that's every president, right? But then the emotional stuff, the Sandy Hook stuff, I was just moved to no end. And I thought they did a phenomenal job. I appreciate the fact that they captured your essence in the movie, or what you do is, and the importance of your job. I mean, it's like Todd said, it's one of the best documentaries I've seen of late. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to watch it and then to sit here with you a couple days later. And I'm just flabbergasted because I have so much respect for what you do as a photographer and as a humanitarian, and doing what you did in his president's 4 years, and what you continue to do, I think is important. And man, advice to people like us that are, just average guys, average people in the country. What can we do to get the word out to make change?
Well, I think it's kind of been incredible, the number of people that have come out to protest the last 6 months, I guess. Sort of everywhere, from in small towns, big cities. It's kind of been incredible. And I think ultimately it comes down to, who you vote for. And I think even though it was as off year an election as you can get, this couple weeks ago, we had a ton of people come out and vote, especially in New Jersey, Virginia, and California. I mean, they had like a huge number of people came out to vote in California, and there was not a single person on the ballot. It was about one issue, a referendum on one issue, and they had like a ton, literally I think more than any off-year election, number of people came out to vote. People waited in line for hours. So, ultimately that's what it is. It takes, I wish, I think we'd be a different country if voting was mandatory, to be honest with you. Because I think, I get it, we make elections kind of hard sometimes. It's like you got one day, it's not on a weekend, it's on a weekday. And a lot of people just cannot take time off. Yep. They're working 9 to 5, and then they got kids they got to go home and make dinner for and get to bed. And sometimes it's hard to find, if you have to wait in line for 2 hours to vote, when people just don't have that kind of time. Fortunately, some states do mail-in ballots, which I think is necessary. But I wish we did it. I wish we made it easier for people to vote, because I think we'd get a much bigger turnout if we made it easier for people to vote. But ultimately, in terms of making change, that's the only way you can do it.
Yeah. Well, I just have to say one thing. It's for our listeners out there, Christmas is coming up. There's 3 great books that you should go out and purchase for somebody you care about, and get the word about the documentary out there. I think it can change lives and change what people are thinking.
The name of the movie is The Way I See It. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that you can rent it on Apple TV Prime Video.
Yeah,
maybe.
I watched it on Prime.
And maybe iTunes. I'm not sure.
Sure.
It is not on Netflix. I know that. And it's not on Hulu, I don't believe. Yeah. But I believe it's on Apple TV and Prime Video.
Yeah. And I think I did see it on that YouTube TV as well. So
okay.
All you got to do is Google it, but definitely Amazon Prime and Apple TV. It currently is available to rent. And I second what Wes said about the documentary. Your work is stunning. At times I was moved to tears. I watched it with my wife, and I got to tell you, she wanted me to tell you that she has mad respect for you. And she thoroughly enjoyed seeing your work and being exposed to you as a person, and had an appreciation for what you've done. So
I'll tell her thank you.
I will. Pete, thank you so very much for spending the time that you did with us today. We really appreciate it. We say it all the time on the podcast. Time is the most valuable thing that we have. And so the fact that you were willing to carve out time of in your day to spend it with us, we just really appreciate that.
You bet. Happy to do it.
Again, check out Pete's work on his website, petesouza.com, where you can find descriptions and links to purchase some of his books, and follow Pete on Instagram at Pete Souza. And we encourage everyone to check out the documentary, The Way I See It. It's an amazing documentary. I think everybody should see it. And I think it gives you hope. And it also makes you remember that this is the America that we want to have and we believe in. It's very compelling and inspiring. You can find it on the streaming services, like we just mentioned, Amazon Prime and Apple TV, amongst a handful of others. And as usual, I will have all this and more in this week's episode notes. For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown. Have a great week.